The entrepreneur starts in a deficit, talking about the liar lid journey. The entrepreneur starts in a deficit. The deficit creates pressure. The pressure forces belief before proof. Belief shapes behavior in the market. The culture of an organization is reflected in the behaviors, habits, rituals. It's belief that shapes behavior in it's belief that shapes behavior. If we're looking at the the journey of the entrepreneur, we have to first start with the deficit because that entrepreneur, that founder, whether they mature into the role of chief executive officer or not, that role chooses them based on the necessity of the organization as the organization grows and infrastructure surrounds the entrepreneur in role, responsibility, title, authority, organization, department. That there is a journey of founder to CEO, whether one realizes it or not, whether the entrepreneur is prepared or not, and can being aware of and understanding the the liar lid journey and what the liar lid is part of entrepreneurs moving through that journey of founder to CEO. There will not all CEOs are founders, but all founders are inherently the the executives of the ultimate decision, even before they're surrounded by the structures and systems and governance and roles, responsibilities, titles, organization from an executive standpoint. And there's a journey that each entrepreneur is on. So the entrepreneur starts in a deficit. The deficit creates pressure. The pressure forces belief before proof. The pressure forces belief before proof. That belief to move into action despite not knowing for certain will impose a certain psychology, a specific individuality that is expressed through the entrepreneur that both in, in impels the organization forward and has the capacity to slow down, undermine, work against the organization. Uh, the pressure forces belief before proof. The belief shapes behavior in the market. And the behaviors of the entrepreneur are what are modeled even without fully being recognized by the team. This is where yeah, so the de so the the deficit is observed in components. There's an economic deficit, right? The absence of capital or the owing, right? One's name, there, no money, negative cash is a deficit, or cash with money owed is a deficit because now someone's name, someone's promise to pay, someone's reputation is on the line. If they have the cash and they owe someone else, now their name and reputation, their social identity is on the line as well. So economic is no like the lack of capital or the owing of a debt in some form or fashion. There's a deficit there. There's a deficit socially. There's socially wrapped up in anything with the name, as I talked about, but there's also being, misunderstood, isolated, being different in the sense that this is a different way to, there are different conditions under which that individual that's assumed the risk of the organization that's ultimately accountable for the success of the products and service coming into the market. Those those conditions will influence how they show up differently than those that are operating within different conditions. That would be one of the friction points between those that are uh, employed and those that employ. There is an implicit friction between these two parties based on the conditions of their environment that make make it um, make it difficult to communicate, which imposes the or which makes it more important to which makes it important for people that work for the organization to believe in the organization and believe in management and for the actions of management to be congruent with their words for the organizations, right? Why would it be important for an organization to recognize what it says it values and have consequences congruent with what it says it values for behaviors for actions that contradict what it says it values. Right? The congruence of the organization, the absence of hypocrisy is necessary for there to be alignment between the employees that work for the organization to believe in that overarching story that helps because that helps burden the natural difference of opinion of how they live because there's an implicit difference in how they will view the world between the entrepreneur who is incentivized differently based on them assuming them being in the deficit of economic, social, identity, informational, which that pressure forces belief before proof. And that is in direct opposition of proof before belief from an employee standpoint. That's where the proximity in a startup, in a sense, a startup is very different than a corporation and culture, right? The culture becomes exceedingly more important to understand as a corporation, well, at least in the past, in a classical sense, as an organization grew, because the proximity to that entrepreneurial spirit was was farther and farther away and more distant. The farther the light is, the less gravity around the sun. Smaller company, even employees, they're close enough to the sun's radius that they have belief before proof. So one of the ways they get incentivized, well, what you find is despite that, um, the people that start the organization tend to do pretty well from an equity standpoint. That's Silicon Valley culture. But the belief before proof is in direct opposition to proof before belief, and proof before belief is money now and more later versus belief before proof, which is no money now and all of it later. Those are differing conditions, differing beliefs, and beliefs, base beliefs that have to be challenged, base beliefs that lead to challenge create um, conflict and undermine undermine action, undermine group cohesion, undermine group, undermine personal responsibility in a group, and distort accountability and make it hard to get things done. Try to think through that. But belief before proof runs in opposition between proof before belief. The the feedback, so if that's employee, employer, employee, proof before belief, so it gets exchanged in capital and believing in the the person, the product, the purpose. The entrepreneur, it's belief before proof. That is a different person. They're like in the sense of how they act, what they don't do, what they value, what they do. And these are different values, ways of relating to what's these differing belief structures lead to conflict absent other invisible threads that hold that hold this the structure together. And it's not just a conversation around capital because the if the simultaneously there's more than one deficit here. So deficit of economic means money, negative cash, owing capital, social, the misunderstood element, the isolation, identity, n- not yet who they believe they are. The entrepreneur, not yet who who they are is wrapped up in the future as much as it is in the present at a heightened degree. Information. Ah, okay. Yes. And if when um the deficit, I'll go back to the deficit. The deficit is economic, it's social, it's identity, it's informational. Informational, there's no clear path. The path is intuitive. The path is based on feedback, data, movement, the space between. It's like the learning, learning through action, learning through repetition, taking the risk. There's that the the assumption of risk and all that comes with it builds the liar lid, which is this organ, this organ that is with them 24 hours, 365, all, that is necessary to protect them from the unknown, the it's like a shield, their power shield. And the the closer that the employees are, they're within that power shield, and the farther that they're away, they have less of that power shield, and the more they're in the unknown, and they it's not theirs, it's not their self. There's like this self around the self. The organ is it's another way to look at the self. Individual has a self, and when somebody starts a business, it's another self distorting the self. And as it grows, it protects everyone, whether they recognize it or not. And when it breaks down, that power shield, all the other selves that lose a part of themselves when they join the company, like if they're not bought into the movement, the mission, they want to go do their own thing, even if that means just go to a different company because they need protection. They need protection to go through their own hero's journey, and the shield is down, and they're naked and they need protection. The right the okay. The deficit creates tension between current reality and an imagined future. Understanding the liar-led journey the entrepreneur is on. The lid is there to protect the entrepreneur against the deficit that's implied in the movement towards from assuming the risk of failure, right? Assuming the ultimate responsibility for the social, individual, economic uh, conflicts that come with starting a business that other people's livelihoods are wrapped up within. The deficit influence is a condition of this, right? It has to work. That would change the thoughts and the thought patterns. The entrepreneur has to convince themselves that what they're doing makes sense when it doesn't, because because sense is because sense is what is. Sense is what making sense of what was, right? So Kierkegaard, life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. It's like you can understand, you can analyze the data after, you can do the math after, you could have a discussion about what happened to regroup and get differing perspectives to then ultimately project that into the future. Someone has to be accountable for that unknown. That's the psychology necessary to move into the unknown. It's like they have to convince themselves of something that that is wrapped up in potential. It's a probability, and there's a probability to fail. That creates psychological pressure that a power shield is necessary to sustain. That's the concept of the lid. The lid is its power and its strength is proportional to the deficit. It's going to be as large and as thick as the deficit is negative or far. The more that's why one of the paradoxes of this is that the worse the conditions are, the more adversity, the greater the lack, the more water and nutrients are in the soil, You could have you could have you could have all the ingredients, but without the wind, nothing is going to grow. You need the wind against the trees for the tree to grow. The deficit is the negative force, and the entrepreneur is taking on those wins head on, and th that they take them on makes them and signals what is necessary, what is real of how to show up for everyone else. That they're willing to take it on signals what they value. And because of the conditions of the deficit, time becomes compressed, the urgency, um, the way that the entrepreneur has to talk to themselves. What, positive self-talk. Why do the entrepreneurs always talk about positive self-talk or, you know, mindset, self-talk, mindset? It's like linguistic programming of self-belief, self-concept to be it's the force field. It's the shield necessary to move through intuition and irrationality. It's the secular leap of faith in that context. And that's where and it's rooted in me, I. And this is where the temper that might be a necessary I to sustain the nature of things. However, that's necessary to stay alive in the present, where the values, the the future and the present, they're at odds. It's like what tempers that? There are there are values that work towards the present, and there are values that work towards the future, and they work in combination. And the friction of them, it's like a seat of judgment. Yeah, it's a seat that will be judged no matter what and is going to be wrong. And yeah, it will not avoid the entrepreneur will not be able to avoid being wrong and must decide anyway. Someone has to decide ultimately, and they will be judged and held to account for the organization's success. That's a lot of, but way before there's an organization, there's an individual that even if it's a bunch of individuals that start, there's going to be an individual that is recognized as the final decision in a business context. If there will be, if it's business, different cultures throughout the world have differing ways to, there's meta values like harmony or honor culture in Middle East or South America or certain parts of Eastern Europe. The individualistic meta value is more US, Canada, Northern Europe, Britain, England, all that. The Eastern Asia is more harmony or face culture. But if it's business, and of course culture, like national culture or hemispheric culture and government influences how business is done, and that gets a little bit more complex. But in an entrepreneurial sense, there is an individual wherever there is a group, wherever there's a group, there's a potential for an individual if they are asked a question and recognized by their name and listened to. And there pops up an individual, even for a moment, in their response to that attention. There is an individual. The attention can fall away from the individual if the group is under focus, or the idea that the group is identifying by is under focus. And there's inherently a pull or a tug on organization and individual, and whether it's business or culture or whatever. But the deficit is the pressure leads to the belief before the proof, and that influences the behavior of the entrepreneur, which sets the tone for the way things are done here in our business, in our culture, in our company culture. And this, the less amount of people that are gathering, the closer the people that are not the entrepreneur are able to experience below their awareness the behavior, how the entrepreneur behaves. And so exceedingly, the culture becomes more vital to comprehend and clarify and codify and scale and operationalize to to scale the behaviors that are best suited to solve to the problems the organization exists to solve. The entrepreneur must believe something that is not yet true. They have to act as if it's already real. And that creates the honest liar. That's honest in public, lies to themselves. Nietzsche's like the visionary lies to himself, the liar to everyone else. That creates a challenge to values. This is maybe where the attention on the customer becomes so important because it focuses. It's like that's the implicit tempering of that self-orientation, self-centeredness necessary to withstand the adversity, the resistance, that shield that we're talking about, that liar lid on that journey, the customer orientation, right? Serving a customer makes it now about the future. It makes it about the relationship. It makes it about it reflects the spirit aspect of the entrepreneur. As organization grows, it develops its own identity, its own inherent self, and that tugs the attention of the entrepreneur away from the customer towards itself. And now the entrepreneur is in between the people and the customers, and that's serving two masters. That comes exceedingly difficult, which is where having other leaders comes in, those that are in position of authority and influence that are that other people below them can look up to for the answer, for what to decide, what to do when it's not clear what to do. There is a journey that if that's one thing I want to take away is that the Lyrelet journey is an expression of the actual journey that entrepreneurs are on, whether they realize it or not. And there is a journey from founder to CEO, and not all CEOs are founders, but all founders are implicitly executives of, even if they're the executive of wiping their own butt. And it's why you hear saying, it's said in business, the founder and CEO often are not the same person, but they can be. They can be. And there are benefits of them being that. There are benefits to the organization of that occurring. And there are costs, but how that journey takes place matters. And for those that want to continue to be in for those entrepreneurs that want to continue to be in the journey, the adventure of entrepreneurship, it would be helpful to recognize this journey and think about company culture in another way. Too much belief leads to delusion. This is where you hear the yes person. I'm going to go to the different sections. Too little belief leads to paralysis. The liar lid is both the engine and the constraint. That's enough today. The deficit forces behavior, creates belief, and belief drives behavior. The pressure forces belief because the pressure comes from the deficit, which is a huge part of that is the identity of entrepreneurs wrapped up in the future of what will be, which would lead to an irrational, just almost like time and space stops, work, what, sacrifice, a degree of sacrifice that benefits them psychically and ultimately can benefit everyone in all ways by bringing goods and services to the marketplace. For that irrational, yeah, the deficit creates pressure. The pressure forces belief. Belief drives behavior. Behavior signals what is valued, and behavior signals what is valued, and the signals of what is valued influences the performance of the people that also sacrifice their time and their space for themselves and the organization. And a lot of, time plays a huge factor here because the idea the neuropsychological research shows that, right, these concepts like flow need I don't remember I don't know how to say that. Mikai, I don't want to butcher this professor's name, but there's a book called Flow talking about, essentially when you're in flow state, time elapses. An hour could feel like a minute. A minute could feel like an hour, okay? For the minute to feel like an hour, there is a deficit involved. I'm sorry. Yes, for the hour to feel like a minute, the deficit is involved, and all things are firing on all cylinders. That our entrepreneur is burdening that irrational state of vision, mission, and behaving in a way that reflects the pressure, reflects the belief system that would come as a consequence of the pressure, where that their identity and their economic and social and psychical powers or forces are wrapped up in a future that comes after sacrificing all their time and energy. It's a very paradoxical place to be in, to believe, because you interview entrepreneurs, they say, I'm doing it for freedom, independence, to write my own life story, while all they do is slave at whatever it is that they do, for less money and less everything. But it's a feeling of being free. It's a feeling or a perception or a story of the, freedom, right? It's a pursuit of happiness, which never actually happens. So the matrix is on. Well, there's all sorts of economic, social, psychical, etc. benefits, but at least perceivably for that entrepreneur that's under that spell. And that spell protects the people that just want a damn job. And to be able to, do what they need to do to eat and drink water and so on. And maybe they have some meaning too. And this everybody's a part of this spell. And the deficit creates pressure. Pressure forces belief. Belief drives behavior. The behavior is what's modeled by the people. The people model the behavior. They feel they now are there's more meaning despite, there's more meaning despite they're bought in, they're participating in this dance. And the more that they're brought in and they're participating to the dance, the higher likelihood they'll be able to afford goods and services that keeps the whole dance going because they'll be promoted, or and incentivized and keep up with the growth of capital as it grows and grows and grows. No, so I'm just there you go.